Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
From AI-inspired insights from farmers.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here, we'd love to hear from you too.
Absolutely.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and definitely leave a comment telling us what you want to see more of on this deep dive.
We're always looking for new ideas, and we really value your feedback.
So what farm-related mysteries are you dying to uncover?
Right.
What questions are keeping you up at night? Let us know, and maybe we'll tackle them in a future deep dive. Today,
Imagine growing your food, not just, in your backyard or something, but like millions of miles away on Mars. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into this whole world of space agriculture, looking at how we might farm on Mars someday.
pretty wild to think about, right?
Yeah, it is. And, you might be thinking about starting your own little farm here on Earth, or maybe you've already got one going. But the stuff they're coming up with to grow food on Mars, it could actually change how we farm right here at home, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The conditions on Mars are so extreme, it's forcing us to rethink everything.
Exactly. So we've got some fascinating research to dig into today. We've got stuff from Utah State University, and then there was that CNN piece about Interstellar Lab.
Yeah.
Oh, and that Science World article about the Martian had some cool insights too, even though it's, fiction. And then there's that thought-provoking piece from Grist about how Martian farming could help us here on Earth.
Yeah, a lot of interesting perspectives to consider.
So we'll be looking at the technology, the challenges, and what it all means for the future of farming, for all of us, really. So let's start with the basics. Martian greenhouses. We can't just, stick a shovel in the ground on Mars and start planting, right?
Nope, not at all. I mean, first of all, the atmosphere on Mars is super thin,
Right.
barely there, really. So there's hardly any protection from radiation.
Right, and it gets crazy cold there, too, right?
Yeah, way below freezing most of the time. And then there's the soil, or I should say the regolith, which is what they call it on Mars.
Or regolith. Okay, so what's the difference?
Well, regolith is basically just pulverized rock and minerals.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any of the organic matter that makes Earth soil so fertile. No, living organisms or anything like that.
Huh. So it's more like dust than actual soil.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's a huge challenge right there, I mean, it makes you realize how much we take soil for granted here.
It really does. And the Science World article mentioned another problem with the regolith, these things called perchlorates.
Right, perchlorates. They're pretty nasty chemicals, actually, toxic
Yeah.
to humans and potentially to plants as well.
So we'd have to deal with those somehow before we could even think about growing anything.
Yeah, that's one of the first hurdles. The article mentioned rinsing the regolith or maybe using bacteria to break down the perchlorates.
Wow, so even on that basic level, it's way more complicated than just planting seeds.
And it gets even trickier. The Science World article pointed out that when Martian regolith gets wet, it compacts like really hard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's almost like concrete, apparently. And that would make it super hard for roots to grow.
That makes sense. They did mention some experiments where they mixed the regolith with fertilized soil, and that seemed to help.
Yeah, that could be a way to make it more workable. But then, of course, we have the whole issue of the environment itself. I mean, we need to create controlled environments, like greenhouses, but not the kind we're used to seeing.
Oh, right. Because a regular greenhouse wouldn't cut it on Mars, would it?
Yeah, not even close. The researchers at Utah State emphasized how important shielding is. I mean, with that thin atmosphere, you've got constant cosmic radiation, and then there's the chance of, meteorites hitting the surface.
Yeah, the article mentioned something about basketball-sized meteorites.
Right. Pretty scary. So they were talking about maybe tunneling underground and using the regolith itself as a protective barrier.
That's actually a pretty clever idea.
It is. But then, of course, you've got no sunlight if you're underground. So how do you provide the light that plants need?
That's a good point. So what are they thinking about for that?
Well, one option is using solar panels on the surface to power artificial lights. But the research from Utah State also talked about a really cool idea using mirrors and fiber optics.
Mirrors and fiber optics, how'd that work?
Basically, they'd use curved mirrors to concentrate sunlight on the surface, and then they'd transmit that light underground using fiber optics.
Wow. And I guess you could control the intensity and even the color of the light that way.
Exactly. You can tune the light to just the right wavelengths for each type of plant.
That's amazing. And that kind of technology could have some pretty cool applications here on Earth too, right? Like for indoor farming or something.
Oh, absolutely. Think about being able to perfectly control the light for every plant you're growing.
Yeah, that would be a game changer.
And it's not just theoretical. I mean, companies are already developing these kinds of systems. The CNN piece about Interstellar Lab was fascinating.
Yeah, their Nuclear Day US system. I was curious about that.
Yeah, so it's basically a bunch of interconnected cube-shaped modules. Each one's like a little self-contained ecosystem. And it's designed to support like 4 astronauts for a 2-year mission.
Wow, 2 years. That's a long time. So what kind of food would they be growing in those modules?
All sorts of things. They mentioned microgreens, vegetables, mushrooms, and even edible insects.
Edible insects, huh? That's definitely a new frontier in food production.
It is. But it makes sense in a closed-loop system like that. I mean, you have to use everything efficiently.
That's a good point. And speaking of efficiency, it seems like AI would play a big role in space farming too.
Oh, for sure. The whole idea of controlled environment agriculture, or CEA as they call it, relies on really precise control over everything like light, temperature, nutrients, water.
Right, it's all about optimizing the conditions for each plant.
Exactly. And AI would be perfect for that. I mean, it could monitor plant health, adjust nutrient levels, manage water usage, all in real time.
And probably do it way more efficiently than we could.
Yeah, definitely. It's like having a million tiny little farmers constantly tending to every single plant.
That's a great image. And the CNN article also talked about different ways of delivering nutrients to the plants. Hydroponics and aeroponics.
Yeah, hydroponics is where you grow plants in a nutrient-rich water solution. And with aeroponics, you basically spray the roots with a fine mist of nutrients.
Huh. Interesting. And they were saying that the best approach might actually change depending on the phase of the mission.
Yeah, like during the trip to Mars. It's zero gravity, right? So a traditional hydroponic system wouldn't really work.
Oh, that's right. The water would just float around everywhere.
Exactly. So aeroponics would be a better option for that stage. You could suspend the plants and mist their roots.
Clever. But I guess once they're on Mars, with some gravity, they could switch back to hydroponics.
Yeah, potentially. It's all about adapting to the conditions. So we've talked about the technology, but there are also some massive challenges to farming on Mars. The distance alone is mind-blowing. It's like, forget Amazon Prime. There's no quick resupply missions.
Right. If you run out of fertilizer, you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah, the Utah State researchers compared a resupply mission to the International Space Station to like a short drive, but a trip to Mars.
Yeah.
That's like going from Logan to Antarctica.
Wow. So you have to be incredibly self-sufficient.
Totally. I mean, they basically have to bring everything they need or figure out how to produce it on Mars.
And even basic resources aren't just lying around on Mars, right? Water.
Well, they believe there's water ice beneath the surface, but extracting it and purifying it is a whole other challenge.
Yeah. And what about nitrogen? Plants need nitrogen to grow, don't they?
Yeah, it's one of the most important nutrients.
Yeah.
But on Mars, it's not readily available in the atmosphere,
Mm.
at least not in a form that plants can use.
So how would they get nitrogen for their plants?
They're looking at using bacteria to capture nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into a usable form, like fertilizer.
Wow, that's some serious science.
It is. And then there's the whole question of what crops to grow. I mean, it's not just about what can survive on Mars. It's about what can provide a balanced and nutritious diet for a whole crew.
That's a good point. So what are some of the top contenders?
Well, the Utah State article mentioned things like lettuce, potatoes, rice. Kind of like in The Martian, actually.
Yeah, I remember that. He was growing potatoes on Mars.
Yeah, but they also pointed out how hard it would be to produce certain things, like fats.
Oh, right. Because you need a good balance of nutrients.
Exactly. So they're looking at things like soybeans for protein and spirulina, which is a type of algae, for fats.
Interesting. And they're even exploring the idea of genetically modifying plants to make them more nutritious or even to produce medicines.
Yeah, that's pretty cutting-edge stuff. But there are still so many unknowns when it comes to how plants will actually behave on Mars.
Yeah, like with the different gravity and the radiation, right?
Exactly. The Science World article brought up that point. I mean, we can simulate Martian conditions here on Earth, but who knows what might happen in the long term.
True. And there's also the whole issue of scale. A small-scale experiment is one thing, but to actually support a colony on Mars, you need a huge, reliable food production system.
Absolutely. And not just food. I mean, plants also produce oxygen, which is
Right.
kind of essential for, breathing.
Right. So they're not just growing food, they're also creating a livable environment.
Exactly. It's all connected. So thinking long term, what does the future of space colonies and Martian agriculture look like? I mean, the CNN article talked about humanity becoming a multi-planet species.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild thought.
It is, and the ultimate goal is to create these closed-loop systems on Mars, where everything is recycled and reused. They even talk about using plant waste to eventually create something like soil.
That's amazing. And the Utah State research even mentioned using bacteria to produce polymers that could be used for 3D printing.
Yeah, imagine being able to 3D print tools and parts on Mars using materials you grew yourself.
Wow. It's like building a whole civilization from scratch.
It really is. And companies like Interstellar Labs see these technologies as essential stepping stones toward that vision of becoming a multi-planet species.
Fascinating. So, while all of this is focused on Mars, the Grist article made a really interesting point. A lot of this stuff could revolutionize farming here on Earth, too.
Oh, absolutely. Like farming on Mars is basically the ultimate example of trying to grow food in a harsh, unforgiving environment.
Yeah.
So the solutions they come up with could have huge implications for, places on Earth facing drought or extreme temperatures.
Yeah, like vertical farming. It uses way less water and fertilizer than traditional farming.
And you can do it anywhere, regardless of the climate or the quality of the soil.
Right.
Like the CNN piece showed that giant vertical farm in Dubai.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Pretty incredible.
It is. And the Grist article also talked about a technique called intercropping, which is basically planting different crops together.
Huh, interesting. How does that help?
Well, it turns out that it works surprisingly well in simulated Martian regolith, and it can also improve yields and soil health here on Earth.
That's cool. And it uses less land and water than just growing one type of crop, right?
Exactly. And then there's the whole closed-loop system idea. I mean, that's something we need to be thinking about more here on Earth, too.
Yeah, becoming more sustainable and minimizing waste. And those Martian greenhouses they're designing could be adapted for places on Earth with extreme climates.
Totally. And the Grist article even talked about using these principles to help communities facing food insecurity and land degradation.
Wow, that's really inspiring. It's amazing to think that trying to grow food on Mars could actually help us feed people and improve agriculture here on Earth.
It shows how interconnected everything is, The drive to explore and push the boundaries of what's possible often leads to unexpected benefits in other areas.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we've looked at the incredible technology and the huge challenges of farming on Mars, from creating artificial environments to choosing the right crops to managing limited resources. But the biggest takeaway for me, and maybe for you listening too, is how relevant all of this is to the future of farming right here on Earth.
Absolutely. The lessons we learn from trying to grow food on Mars could change how we farm, how we think about sustainability, everything.
And just think about this. How can the principles of closed-loop agriculture, efficient resource use, in controlled environments, all things that are crucial for surviving on Mars, how can those things inspire you to think differently about your own garden or even the whole food system? What kind of Martian mindset could you adopt to make your own growing practices more sustainable and resilient? Pretty interesting stuff to think about.
It really is. Food for thought, literally.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
And until next time, keep on growing.
Happy farming. Hitting that like button and smash that subscribe.